The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It is November 1st. I hope that all of you are safe and well after the last couple of days. Oh my goodness, right? We're looking at the images for those of you on the East Coast, and our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. I can't imagine, as I look at the images and I see the things that have happened to people's homes and that they've been without power, of course, it's just mind-boggling, right? I don't think any of us can really get our heads wrapped around that. But then I think to myself, some of those families are families with children on the autism spectrum, and then it really goes off the rails for me that I can't imagine with all the other things that we all have to deal with having those kinds of things happen. We will be interested in hearing from those of you who, as you get power back on, and if you're tuning in, if there are things that you need, please let us know so that we can let other people know what it is you need and spread the word about that. And I mean that sincerely. I can't even imagine. But we are going to be with you here live for the next 2 hours talking about topics having to do with autism and how we can be the most productive, most efficient possible team member for us on a team of people working with a child on the spectrum, helping them to reach their full potential. That's really what we spend our time here. And it's a full gamut, right? Sometimes it's having a toy that was irreplaceable that needs to be replaced. Sometimes it's getting help to get ABA. We talk about ABA a lot, applied behavior analysis, because we know it's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. Sometimes it's talking about the emotions. Sometimes it's talking about the sensory issues, the challenging behavior. Sometimes it's talking about the funding. So the wide range of things that we talk about on this show, all things having to do with autism and how we can all progress, because progress is the name of the game, right? So we'll be talking about all those things. This show is meant to be interactive, and you guys participate on a daily basis, and we enjoy that, but we'd like for more of you to participate. This show is meant to be what can help you. So we plan things, but the plan is secondary to what you guys write in and tell us. So please take time to participate. Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can participate, that you can be talking to us on the screen here. And while she does it, I want to remind you that you can watch the live show at autism-live.com. If you go to the live show, there's a box there that says Shannon is answering right now. That means we are live, and you can type whatever you'd like in there and it shows up magically on my screen. And it can be conversational. You can write in whatever you would like, or you can ask questions and say, hey, the next time you get an expert in, or later on today when you're talking to this person, I'd like to talk, or I saw this video where you were talking to so-and-so, I'd like to know more about X, Y, and Z. I'm spitting, I'm so excited. Okay, so all of those different things you can do when you're watching us on autism-live.com, which, by the way, on that channel, we play endlessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we are live starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time for 2 hours Monday through Friday. We weren't here yesterday because it was Halloween, and we're going to talk about Halloween things throughout the day. But we like to start the day. First of all, before I start the day with the jargon of the day, I want to remind you that, there's our jargon of the day. I want to remind you that as we talk about things here on the show, I always want to be clear that I'm not an expert. I am not an expert in autism. I am not an expert in parenting. The things I'm not an expert in. I'm certainly not an expert in ABA. I am walking this path with so many of you with a child on the spectrum. And I am in the really fortunate and grateful position that people, and it wasn't because of me. Let's just go right there, right? It wasn't because I knew what I was doing and I knew who to ask and I knew where to go, because I sure didn't. But for whatever reason, the universe dropped a couple of people into my life who said, you got to get your kid help, and it's got to be ABA, and you got to start right now. And there's other things that you can be doing too, but priority ABA, ABA, ABA. And they introduced me to the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and the rest of my life, I'm going to be really, really grateful that I ran into those people that helped me on this journey, because I did not know, would not have known. And they also said, and here's where you have to go to get the funding, and so my child got the help that he needed. And I always thought during the process, what about everybody else? What if I hadn't heard this? What if I didn't know? Where would my child be right now? And my child is doing really well. He's in typical fourth grade, at the top of his class. I was in his classroom all day yesterday, and we will talk about that later. I was there all day, and I got to see how all these little 9-year-olds in a fourth grade class interact, and, an interesting breed of people. I will just say that. 9-year-old people, they're very interesting and adorable, but very interesting how their brains work, and it was very fun and exciting. But my child is in completely included regular fourth grade and excelling. And I have a lot to be grateful about that. And so I am here to pay that forward, to help if you are watching and you need help and support. So tell us what you need. Tell me what you need, and I'll find answers as best as I can. And it's all free. There's no cost for watching the show. There's no cost for asking questions. There's no cost for saying, Shannon, can you track this down for me? Look, I remember what it was like when I was in my early days, and I would call my mother up and say, I don't have time to look this up. Can you look this up for me? And fortunately, I had that, and my mother was good at Googling, and she would and send me links and stuff. So I'd like to be that, and hopefully much more, bringing experts in that you guys can talk to. So there is that. But we do like to start every morning with something called the jargon of the day. And this morning and all this week, we've been going back over some really beginning basic terms. And today's term is DTT. This is something I always talk to you guys about. You need to make friends with the jargon, because you need to understand what's being said. And when you hear people talk about ABA, applied behavior analysis, and that was our jargon term the other day, we know that ABA is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. But sometimes when you will go and start talking to people about getting ABA, people start to talk about DTT. And it's very common that people confuse these two terms as being synonymous, that they're one and the same, and they're not. And I always like to remind all of us that they are not. So let's take a look at what the actual definition for DTT is. It's discrete trial teaching, training that focuses on a single cycle of a behaviorally based instruction routine. We've talked before on the show about something that's called the 3-term contingent. I call it the ABCs of behavior. A stands for antecedent. Something happens, right? There's something that will happen, and then the B happens, which is the behavior, and then the C happens, which is the consequence. This is true for all of us, for whether we have autism or we don't have autism. We all are engaging in behavior all the time, and there is always something that happens, a behavior, and a consequence. Think about it in your own life. Well, when we want to train someone to be able to do something, whether it's to run a marathon or it's teaching a child to speak, how difficult is it if we try to train 3,000 things at the same time, right? And if it's something that's already difficult for the child, and we're setting up a circumstance in which we want the child to see that the consequence is pleasant, because we know that first rule of thumb is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, in order for any of us to do anything over and over and over again, there has to be a paycheck. There has to be some sort of payoff for it, right? So imagine a small child that they blow bubbles, right? And mom laughs and is like, yeah. Now, maybe the antecedent was that the baby was bored. Maybe the antecedent was that the baby had gas, but the behavior was that they blew bubbles. And the consequence was that mom went nuts and said, that's wonderful, yay, and made funny faces. And now the baby smiles because they liked what mom did. Okay, well, that's one little sliver of behavior, right? But if the baby gets gas again and blows the bubbles and mom goes, yay, then it's possible, and if this keeps happening, it's possible that over time, the baby is going to enjoy that yay so much that they might automatically start engaging in blowing bubbles so that mom will go, yay, right? And we see this throughout our lives, that these kinds of things happen. So when you have somebody who's having difficulty learning something, can we take a bubble in space and pull it out and teach that skill with that A, that B, and the C really succinctly and not muddy it up with other stuff? Yeah, we can. That's discrete trial teaching. So let's look at our working definition, teaching one targeted behavior at a time. So if we want the child to do something, we're going to set up an antecedent, a behavior, and a consequence for it that is very clear, so that the first couple of times that we teach it to the child, we might even motor them through it, physically prompt them through it, but we get to that consequence, which is the reward, and it helps to make it more likely that the child will do it the next time. So stop for a second and think about all the things that you'd like to teach your child. And think of one thing. And I know for a lot of you, we ask you guys all the time, what would you like your child to be able to do? And there's a lot of you out there who say you want your child to speak. Not unusual for that to be on our list of things that we want our child to do. There are a series of these little bubbles, that I call them, of behavior that we can teach that can lead our child to the most likely opportunity that we will get the child to make a vocal sound. There are a whole series of them where we can get them to imitate sound, and then from there to be able to build the muscles so that they can articulate certain sounds together, so that they can say a word and then two words together and then three words together and then ask a question and answer a question, and all the way to be able to build conversation. Imagine how many little bubbles of behavior that would take. But if we teach them and are patient and make sure that the child is reinforced for each one of these things, what we see is progress. So DTT is a really, really important thing to learn about. It is an element, one element of ABA. When we talk about ABA in the grand scheme of things, certainly one of the things that we're absolutely going to do within ABA is DTT. Because we know that it's really effective at beginning to teach a specific skill. When I think about my son when he was little, and I would try to teach him how to do something, and I like all the things that are flooding through my head that I would try to teach him, even counting 1, 2, 3, right? And usually with most kids, if you taught 1, 2, 3, eventually they'll get it, and they repeat it, and you get on to 4, and so on and so forth. That wasn't working with my son. Things just weren't sticking. It wasn't until they came in and started with DTT and paired it with enough reinforcement and giving him enough opportunities and making sure that it was 100% clear and it wasn't muddied by other things. So they would teach the 1, 2, 3, and he would be reinforced and they gave him many more opportunities and he would get it, right? So DTT, really important, and it is miraculous how you can begin to teach a child a skill using DTT, but it can't be the only element. If you're working with somebody who says we're doing strict DTT and that's all we're doing with this child, that's not going to get it done. That's not going to help you to reach the highest progress. We have to do DTT and a whole host of other things to get a child to their highest potential. So I think that DTT is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but DTT and ABA are not synonymous. DTT is a very important part of ABA, but it cannot be the be all end all. When you hear people talking about, oh, don't do ABA, it turns kids into robots. Those are people who think all you're doing is DTT and teaching a rote response. DTT is not all of ABA. All right, if you have questions about that, write in, because I want to make sure, and I'm just going to check to make sure that nobody has so far. They haven't. Okay, but write in, because this is something that's really important that you understand the difference, because when you're in meetings talking about the services that your child is going to get, of course you want DTT, but you want much more than that. All right? Okay, moving on. Let's go on to the question of the day. Our question today, I know it seems like a year since we were here on Tuesday, right? So much has happened. Yesterday was such a busy day between people and hurricanes and Halloween, and oh my goodness. But we were talking about flexibility this week. So how has your child's inflexibility issues impacted your family's life? This is where we get real honest about it, right? Because there are times when anybody's inflexibility makes it difficult for everyone else, right? Everybody has to compensate. And it's not just our kids, by the way. I've shared before on the show that I went through a period after my son was diagnosed, about a year and a half in, where I had some difficulties with some obsessive compulsive and anxiety stuff, and it made it hard. I couldn't drive. I just couldn't drive for a period of time, and everybody else had to compensate, right? Because I was inflexible about it. And our kids will experience this too. So how has it impacted your life, the whole family's life, when your child has been inflexible? We went trick-or-treating last night, and it was very interesting to me, and we went with another boy from Jem's class, and a completely neurotypical young man, and his younger brother. And it was very interesting to me as we would go up to houses, because my son does have some inflexibilities about darkness. He's really in a phase right now where he's afraid of the dark and afraid of things jumping out. It's not unusual, right? It is not anymore in the realm of concern. You know, he's worked on things, but he still has fears. We all have fears, right? But it was really interesting watching him negotiate that, and whether he went to the house or not. And there were a couple of houses he just said, no, I just don't need to go there. And he had the language to be able to say that. Now, when he was little, he would have laid down on the sidewalk and thrown a tantrum, or climbed his father like he was a tree and sat on his head and screamed his head off. And I can remember one Halloween where we just had to go home. We just had to go home because he had fallen apart. But my question for you, how has your child's inflexibility impacted the family's life? And we will make some time to check in on Facebook later on to see the kinds of things that you guys have written in there. Okay. And of course, I've already given away our topic this entire week is flexibility. And of course, we're talking about this having to do with us, but also having to do with our children. Everybody has inflexibility issues, everyone. And in fact, I mean, it's like the two sides of the coin. Why can't people just be accepting of the fact that our kids are making noises or engaging in some sort of stereotypy that is a little annoying? Why can't they be flexible about that, right? Two different ways of looking at it. My thing as a parent always is, I would like for my child not to be in a position where he can't do something that he wants to do because of his inflexibility. So that's the place that I'm coming from with that. And you guys can write in and tell me where you're coming from that. But that is our topic this week, flexibility, that we'll continue to talk about. We've got some exciting things today. Healthy eating. I know, in the realm of flexibility and wanting our kids to be flexible, healthy eating is sometimes a big issue, right? And it's not just our kids, especially the day after Halloween. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We have a Mission Possible video to show you. In fact, we have a lot of videos to show you today, some really exciting exciting stuff. We've got some Thanksgiving, November kind of cooking segment for you. We have a craft segment for you, something that you guys can be doing with the kids at home. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be joined with a very special guest that I'm thrilled that we finally have an opportunity to have him with us on the show. Travis Breeding is going to be with us, and he is a young man and an author on the spectrum with a new book out, and we're really excited to hear all about that. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined via Skype by Travis Breeding. Stick with us. Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Teacher has some glasses.
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm thrilled to be here. We have a very special guest joining us via Skype. It is Travis Breeding, who is 27 years old and an author. So, Travis, are you there with us right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Travis, first bit of business. I have to ask your permission. Are you willing to let us talk to you on air and videotape you?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. Okay, so We are here with Travis Breeding. He is 27 years old, on the autism spectrum, and an author. So thrilled to have you here with us, Travis. I know that you have several books, but a new book called The Reality of Living Within Two Worlds. And we're going to let people at home know how to get that book in just a minute. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about when and how you were diagnosed and what you were diagnosed with.
Okay. Basically, I was diagnosed, it was October of 2007. I was 22, and I'm very high functioning, so I kind of, the typical slip by, the schools are looking for the academic stuff. They're not really looking for the social impairment so much, or at least in the past, they weren't. And so I kind of went through school undiagnosed, and my trouble really started when I went to college and attempted school. And people with Aspergers are typically what I call like late bloomers. And so I didn't really like show the interest in the social interaction and friendship until, I was in college, and I wanted that. And then I didn't have the social skills to connect with people. And so I started seeking out counseling for that. And that eventually led to an Asperger's diagnosis. But as you probably are all too familiar with, it also before the Asperger's led to bipolar and schizophrenia and all sorts of other fun things, ADHD as well.
So when you were a teenager, what kinds of difficulties did you have, or were you totally fine then and it was just that the social component of going to college is when you noticed, or were there things going on when you were a teenager?
I mean, there were things going on when I was a teenager. Like, I noticed that I was different and couldn't connect with people like other people were connecting. But there was a couple things in place that were really helpful and kind of let me get through school without having any real issues. And that one would be what I call one is a special interest. I was in music, I was in band and show choir and all those things, backup band. And so I played trombone, and the trombone was like a special interest. So I would come home and just practice that like 8 hours a night, and that really, I was absorbed in that special interest. And so I wasn't really, the other stuff wasn't noticeable. And then the other thing that was going on is when you're in those groups like that, like you're in the marching band, the show choir, you have I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Atwood.
Yes.
So you have what's called, he refers to it as like associates, to where I was with kids hanging out by design because I was in that group. So it was kind of like having kids like practice with, but I wasn't really friends with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you feel like that as a teenager you had any friends instead of associates?
Honestly, when I look back on it, I don't. Just because, I had a lot of situations where, I thought I had friends because I would end up, it was like, you can go to Taco Bell with us after the game if you buy all of our meals type of thing, or that type of thing. And you're probably familiar, you probably are very aware of that stuff that happens.
Yeah, we call that bullying.
Yes, getting taken advantage of, bullying, that type of thing. So I actually didn't have, I've honestly never really had, it wasn't until recently, honestly, I've never really had what I would call a real best friend. I had a friend in school until 5th grade, but then he moved to Iowa in 5th grade. But it wasn't until, and I've been through some cases where I thought I was getting into a friendship, but honestly, I haven't really had what I would call a real true friend until like this past summer. And I really met someone who's like a really good best friend, and we, it's very helpful. I think as I get older too, the people I'm trying to be friends with are a little older, so she's like more mature. She gets the autism a little bit, and so it's helpful to have that. And it's really helpful. That's the thing that I don't think people understand is it's helpful to have that one friend or somebody that you can kind of, lean on, and someone who kind of cares.
Yeah.
It's very important to have someone in your life like that.
Absolutely. We all want that. It's important for everyone. And so talk to us a little bit about this new, because you've written several books. This is your 7th book, but the new one is called The Reality of Living Within Two Worlds. And if somebody gets this book, what kinds of things are they going to find, Travis?
You're going to find a lot about, it's typical for people with autism. I often find that I myself even create a make-believe world, sometimes like imaginary world, so to speak, escape into imagination. And it's when you're feeling overwhelmed, like socially, I just use like the make-believe world as kind of an scapegoat. You get into your own world and you kind of imagine things, and you kind of, and I call it balancing act between two worlds, because you're trying to live in the real world that you really don't understand, but then you're also creating this make-believe world. And the thing about the make-believe world is nice is because as someone with autism, like when I create the make-believe world, I have complete control over what's going on in that world because I make it up. And so it's also a very helpful coping mechanism in some cases, because it can help you get through some rough times. But it can also be a dangerous place, so to speak, because if you stay there too long, you don't want to get too far away from reality, living in the real world, that type of situation.
Yeah.
And it's very important. It's also, I find the autism mind to be so unique, because, and I talk about this in the book, but when I'm in that make-believe world and I create that make-believe world, it's like I'm creating a make-believe world to help me cope with situations in the real world. But then it's like my one friend, my friend, like my real friend, they become like my only tie and connection to the real world then. And so like I'm kind of trying to balance that, and it's just like a balancing act trying to figure everything out. And it's also, there's this myth about people with autism or Aspergers syndrome. Like I hear all the time, it's like people with Aspergers syndrome do not lie. And it's true. It's very true, actually. But if you think about it, I have parents ask me a lot, why does my child tell me they flushed the toilet when I look and they obviously haven't flushed the toilet? Like, why are they lying about silly things like that? It's because they often struggle with that conflict of explaining things and why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? And so if you think about it, if you create a make-believe world in your mind thinking, you tell yourself that you did this, so you don't have to explain it, so to speak, you start, and what if you believe your own make-believe world, then are you really telling a lie?
Interesting. Very interesting. And Travis, where can we get this book?
You can find that book on Amazon and also CreateSpace. Or you can add me. I have a Facebook, and I have all the links on there as well. So.
Okay. And your website is travisbreeding.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so you've got a wealth of information there and more about all of the books that you have authored on travisbreeding.com.
Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to take a break, but Travis, I'm going to ask you to stay with us. Do you mind staying with us for one more segment?
Oh, not at all. That'd be
okay.
great.
So we're going to take a break and come back and talk more with Travis after these messages.
My son.
My son.
My brother.
My daughter is one of the
1 in 88 children on the autism spectrum.
I have autism.
I have autism.
I have autism, and I want you to see me as an individual.
And not as a label.
I want to find out why my brother has autism.
I want the government to say that autism is a public health crisis.
I need to know who will take care of my child when I'm gone.
I want to know what treatments, what solutions are out there for my child. We need insurance reform in all 50 states.
I want autism to be an unavoidable topic for those running for office this fall.
I want my students to be
safe in school.
I want the bullies to leave me alone.
Autism Speaks encourages all Americans to ask candidates, how will you make a difference for those living with autism?
I want a Senate,
a president, a Congress that recognizes autism
as an urgent public health
crisis it is.
I want our lawmakers to listen.
Make your voice heard this election. Visit autismvotes.org.
Welcome back. Our special guest right now is Travis Breeding. He is a young man on the autism spectrum with an Asperger's diagnosis, which he didn't receive until he was 22 years old. So Travis, I want to welcome you back to Autism Live. And I really am very interested in this, that you were progressing through your life and having, you said before, having difficulties from time to time with different social issues. What led you at the age of 22 to go and seek out a diagnosis?
I just knew that I could see, and that's the thing about, there's also a myth in the autism community from some people that, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, you're so high functioning, you should consider yourself lucky because you're so high functioning. But the problem with being high functioning is that you're also very aware of what's going on, and you can see the differences socially. And so I just I could constantly tell that there was like a higher level of connection that other people were establishing with each other that I really wanted to access, but I didn't know how. And so I was having problems with my friendships because I'm someone who's very, I guess people call it clingy. and that kind of thing. Like, and I don't understand how to, like I like my friend, like I text a lot, like every day. And so I don't understand the concept of like playing hard to get, so to speak, and not, and so I was having problems with that, and people were complaining and that type of thing, which, I wanted to find out what was going on, basically find out what was wrong with me. So I sought out counseling for that as well.
And so at some point, though, they said to you, we want to look at you for this thing called Asperger's. Were you already aware of what Asperger's was? Was it something that was on your radar?
No, honestly, and in fact, and it's amazing how far my life has come in the 5 years since I've been diagnosed. I mean, obviously, like I had heard of autism. I didn't really know about it, but I hadn't even heard of Asperger's at the time. So, which is kind of interesting and ironic because I think starting within the next year or so, Asperger's isn't going to be in the DSM anymore.
Right,
So.
right. Absolutely. And
yeah.
so you, at some point, you went into some sort of appointment and they said you have Asperger's. What did that feel like for you?
It was really, it was kind of, I don't know. I didn't really feel much at first because I didn't know what it was. And then I started researching. And honestly, the first book I read, we talked about him a little bit earlier, The Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome.
Yeah.
By Tony Atwood. And that book is just phenomenal. That's the first book I read, and it really helped me understand myself and what's going on. And then I just started researching it, putting pieces of the puzzle together. And it's really, the key to life with Asperger's or with autism really is to not, and what I found is to not try and compare yourself to other people and other friendships. For example, sometimes I see like a friend and they're interacting with a different friend a different way, and I think that I should be interacting with them in that same way. But our friendship is different. And so what we're talking about there is that I have a book out called Social Thinking and it's about autism and social thinking in context. And what's different is between each friendship, there's different context. And so you might have a friend who's doing something with another friend that you see, and you think you want to be doing that same thing, doing the same stuff with them. But your friendship doesn't have the same context as theirs.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to understand those contexts.
It is. And it's very, just kind of an example. Sometimes, like, if I see a friend and another person comes up and they hug them, like, pick them up and, like, twirl them around a little bit. I don't know if you've ever seen that. But, like,
yes.
So little things like that. But, like, then I think to myself in my head, it's like, I've never done that with my friend. Why haven't I ever done that with my friend? But really, when it comes down to it, like, and what I've learned recently is that it doesn't matter, because that's their friendship and that's their context that they have, and our friendship and our context that we have is totally different. And so that's honestly helped me a lot, is understanding that, the context as well.
Well, really important things that you're saying, and I love hearing them. So often we hear these things from somebody who doesn't have a diagnosis, isn't on the spectrum, and it really, it makes it hard to understand. And so it's so wonderful and refreshing to hear from you what it's like for you, Travis. So I really appreciate that. And my last question for you is, so you're 27 years old. What lies ahead for you? What are your goals? What are you working towards right now?
Honestly, my goals are to make a career out of writing and speaking, being on the speaking circuit, talking about autism, that type of thing, because I really want people with autism to understand one thing, and at least, there are different opinions and different viewpoints, but from my perspective, a cure isn't really something that I'm interested in or necessarily after. The one word that I really want people with autism to find is hope. And for me, like, finding hope was in finding a true friendship with someone. And once I had that true friendship, it's just like, it makes your whole life kind of flow better, I guess. Just your world makes more sense. And so I've been able to focus more on writing and doing stuff like this. And my goal is to be able to, make a career out of helping others and give others hope about autism as well.
Well, I think that's amazing, Travis, and I think that you are amazing. We want to remind everybody that they can go to www.travisbreeding.com, breeding with 2 E's.com, and that they can also buy your books on CreateSpace, you said?
Yeah, Create Space or Amazon.
On Amazon. So again, Travis Breeding. And Travis, thank you so much for being with us. And we hope that you will stop back some other time and let us know other things that are going on with you. Will you do that?
Definitely. I'm glad
Okay.
to.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Remarkable young man, Travis Breeding, author, 7 books now. The most recent one is The Reality of Living Within Two Worlds. You can find them and the links to them on www.travis, Travis, breeding, BREEDING.com. We'll be back after these messages. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm Shannon Penrod, and with me in the kitchen right now is Emily Goodwin. She's the technical director of our show and very creative, so I've asked her to be here with me to show you some really fun, easy, and healthy recipes that you can do for Thanksgiving with your children. Okay, so the first thing we want to show you how to do is make this lovely fall bouquet of vegetables. What we've used here are many different colors of peppers, but we made some awesome dip that are holding the skewers of the vegetables so that, yes, Emily's showing you, your kids can dip them in. It really encourages them to eat their colorful veggies. And the dip was made with sour cream, cream cheese, and a lovely organic ranch dip mix. So easy to find and easy to make, and if you chill it, it sets up a little bit harder so that you can stick the skewers in and they stand up. So what we need to make the actual leaves are lots of different colors of peppers that we have, and some skewers and some cookie cutters. Before the kids come though, you want to prep a couple of things and get them ready, because you're going to need a sharp knife to cut into the pears. I'm taking off the top of the pear and the bottom, and I'm removing that to the side, just making a cut into it, and I'm going to take out the seeds and the little spines as much as I can so that I can lay it as flat as possible. And Emily, how about if you pick out a cookie cutter for me there that I'm going to cut.
Go with this one.
And if you have time, you can cut all these little spines out so that it makes it easier for the kids. And then invite the kids in with the cookie cutters, and you lay it flat. And she's picked this wonderful leaf. I'm going to find a spot where it's going to fit pretty well. And I want to start it, but don't get too far before I take a plate, stick it on top of the cookie cutter, and push down. And you can hear the little crunch sound. It just makes it easier on the hands when you do that. And you can see that sometimes there's little shreds that I need to take care of, but it makes a lovely leaf. And I'm going to hand that off to Emily so that she can skewer it while I take another piece of pepper. This is from a red one. I'm going to make a lovely maple leaf out of this one. I'm going to start it, put the plate on it, and crunch it. And the kids love it. Makes a terrible little crunchy noise, but it's really kind of fun. Get some aggression out, pull it out, and just clean it up a little bit around the edges. But you get the idea. It makes a lovely, crisp autumn leaf that's so colorful. And we stick them in the dip, and the kids enjoy taking them out of the pot and sticking them in the dip and eating them. It's a wonderful way to introduce them to the fun vegetables and get the rainbow inside them, because we always talk at my house about we need to eat the rainbow. We know that all those colors are good for us, and it tastes good. Wonderful. Easy to do. And now we are going to make some really awesome fruit turkeys. We need a Bosque pear, we need an apple and an orange. This is kind of a light-skinned orange, but it is an orange, and some lemon juice. What I've already done is taken half of a lemon and squeeze it, because we don't want our apples to get brown. Squeeze it, I know. It's spitting at us both. That's okay. It smells good. And I would probably, depending on the age of my child, prep some of this ahead of time. But if they're good with dull knives, and you don't need a sharp knife for any of this, then you can have them help. I just cut the pear in half. And if you wanted to, if your child's a big fruit eater, you could go ahead and core it now. But we're going to assume that they're not going to eat the whole thing. And she's placed her turkey there. Now I'm going to take an apple that's been washed, and I'm just going to cut it into segments. I'm going to take the time to core these and have you dip them in the lemon. That's going to prevent it from browning, because we know that our kids generally don't like to eat things that are brown. They say it's gone bad. Dipping it in the lemon, it gives it a little bit of tang and keeps it from browning. What I like about this is that we're encouraging our children to play with our food. And that's a good thing to get them to eat healthy. Have them play with the food. Arrange it like feathers around the plate. I think that's probably enough. And then I'm going to take the orange and cut it into segments. And these are going to become other feathers on our turkey. And you could put other fruits in, and you could put other vegetables in if you wanted to. You could also put it on a bed of some kind of nut butter if your child doesn't have allergies to those. You could do peanut butter or almond butter, anything like that. So we've got them all arranged so that it looks like feathers. We have to give this turkey some character. So we're going to take half of a cashew, and I'm going to have you figure out where his nose goes and just jam it right in there. And then these are all natural, dehydrated. They're just dried cranberries that we're going to use for a snood. And go ahead and stick a snood next to his little nose. They start to really have some character. And what we did was took really organic, fresh, dried mango pieces and with scissors cut little feet. And the kids can do these with kitty scissors and plop those feet right on there. And this is a great thing to give to a child, something to do, and then they get to eat their turkey, gobble it up. Really healthy, really fresh tasting, fabulous stuff for our kids. Awesome. Gobble, gobble.
Gobble, gobble. Now we're moving on to our politically correct Native American corn cookies. We have some organic candies here. We have some generic white frosting. We have some fruit roll-up here.
You can get these organic and vegetable colored so that you aren't using artificial colors and flavors. If you choose to, you pretty much have to order them online, but you can get them.
Yes. And then we have just some oval-shaped cookies. You can use any kind of cookie. You can use shortbread or wafer. These are just the ones that we have here. So I split my cookie in half. And then you're just going to use a little bit of frosting. And you're only actually frosting one end of the cookie. So you don't even need that much frosting. And then we're going to use our candies and decorate it to look like an ear of Native American corn.
Mine's very orange. I don't know why. Okay.
So it should look like this when you're there. And this is the hard part, because the fruit roll-up is a little sticky, and I have a sharp knife, but you certainly don't need one. It's very soft to cut. And this one happened to come in 2 colors, so I cut the blue piece off, or you can cut just 1/2 of your fruit roll-up. You're just gonna wrap the bottom half. This just helps support the leaves once you start to attach the green. So you're just wrapping the bottom half of the cookie. Then with the green part, you're gonna wanna cut some leaves just like this. And I cut about 4 of these out with a piece of fruit roll-up I have left. They don't have to be perfect.
And kids will enjoy this, and you really can use a table knife for this. In fact, I'm going to do that with my table knife here.
There we go.
Oh, that's super duper easy. It's fun too. It's a little on the sticky side. This is a great sensory thing.
And then from there, you're just gonna attach your leaves as if it were an ear of corn. So they'll flap out just a little bit, and I start with the back 2 leaves. And it stretches, it's fruit roll-up. And then front 2 leaves. So it's starting to look like an ear of corn. And then I use the extra fruit roll-up just to wrap the bottom of the cookie to complete the green, because sometimes you can see through to the blue. But then that's it, and you've got your little ear of corn cookie.
Mine's not fully done, but he's coming along. Cool.
Pretty easy.
Very fun and tasty too. Welcome back to Autism Live. Every week we try to give you a healthy eating tip. We all know it's important to eat healthy, and it's important for our kids to eat healthy. It's difficult sometimes, right? Let's face that. It's hard for us. It's hard for our kids. It's a busy world. You know, it seems like eating healthy takes a little bit more time, a little bit more money, a little more thought. But what I want to talk about specifically today is sugar. I know, it's the day after Halloween. But we need to talk about this because today is November 1st, which means it is the beginning of National Diabetes Month. And it's important that we be aware of how much sugar we eat and how much sugar our children eat. And some of our children are very reactive to sugar. But not only that, it seems like the things that get paired with sugar, let's face it, when you put sugar together with fat, you usually get things that are really tasty. And for some of our kids and for some of us, things that are high fat are really not good, and the high sugar is not good either. Also, especially nowadays for our kids, sugar is paired a lot with artificial food colors and artificial food flavors. And while there are certain studies that suggest that that's not good for anybody's kids, there are certainly enough studies to clearly suggest that it's not good for kids on the autism spectrum. So in the coming week, I know you've got a bag of candy that's sitting there, right? And I can tell you, I mentioned the other day that my son can't have sugar. He just can't, and there's so much diabetes in my family that we've been clear about that from the time he came out, right? The doctor said to me, don't give this child even juice unless it's severely watered down, because you don't want to set him up for a life that's filled with difficulties. And we've always had to, there's been no sugar, but we've had to ration. Let's face it, sugar comes in lots of different forms. So there's, the white refined sugar, but then there's a whole list of other things, including carbs, that convert into sugars. So we've had to really strictly monitor his intake of fruit and things of that nature. And for a lot of years, he wasn't even able to eat potatoes because he was that sugar reactive. So in our household, and it is easier, I'm just going to say it's easier for us because we've never had to deal with taking candy away from him because he didn't have it. He's had one lollipop in his life. I had a friend who was watching him for me for an hour and gave him a lollipop and said, oh, I had no idea. So he's had one lollipop in his life, and so he doesn't know what he's missing. And so I get it that it's that much easier for me. But I will tell you that because he doesn't know what he's missing, he's a boy who really enjoys eating his vegetables. Now, if I don't keep after his carbs, now he can have potatoes again, and if I let him have potatoes at a meal, he's less interested in the vegetable than if I don't let him have the potato. So there are some things that we can do for our kids to capitalize on what they will eat and what they don't eat, so that we can decrease the amount of sugar, so that we can decrease the amount of fat, and we can decrease the amount of artificial food coloring and flavors by, when they are hungry, giving them the thing that we most want them to eat that we know is the least preferred. So I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm cooking dinner, everything is not ready at the same time, or my child is saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. We've talked about this before. Putting out an array of vegetables, like those leaves that we just saw in the segment that we did. By the way, that dip was just one of the most fabulous things on the face of the planet. We're still talking about it. But, engage them in it. Have them be able to cut the leaves and eat them. If we give that kind of stuff to them when they are most hungry, then they are more likely to eat it than if they've been able to fill up on the other things. So just the order in which we give things, we want to be mindful of. I don't know why, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer for a vegetable to cook, and I have sat my hungry son down at a table and given him his protein and his carb with the vegetable coming later, and you know what? I might as well not, because if he's got the other things, he's going to fill up on those things and he's going to be less likely to eat the vegetables. And that's a child who enjoys his vegetables. So we can learn from that and space our order, but also don't give in to the sugar thing. Even if you have to, one of the things that I have heard suggested is keeping a little diary and a sheet somewhere of when you have your child ingest sugar to see where you're at. And especially this week when there's that bag of Halloween candy, how many pieces a day are we allowing and what is reasonable? We know that if we take kids to an amusement park and give them cotton candy and then expect them to eat dinner afterwards, right? It's going to be a disaster. It isn't really that different with the Halloween candy. I already brought my Halloween candy into the office. It disappears. The Lego Fairy came last night and left Xbox points, because that's what the Lego Fairy leaves at this point, but took all the candy away, and the candy is here at the office now for grown-ups who can potentially I say potentially decide what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate, because it doesn't need to be in my house. And we mentioned last week that a lot of dentists are out there buying back candy by the pound. So if you've got a bunch of candy left over because you didn't have as many trick-or-treaters and your kids got candy, go to that dentist's office, sell it back by the pound, go buy something else with it that's really fun and reinforcing for the children. And then I believe that candy goes to the troops, which what a lovely thing for that to, a much better thing than raising our children's glycemic index for the next week and us having to deal with a lot of challenging behavior. Even if you have to be sly about it, I'm not one that usually says, lie to your children, but they had a whole lot of fun and you picked through the candy and you went through it and decided what was safe and put that into a bin. If you go and take 22 pieces out of it every hour so that it slowly is diminishing, or pick the things that are the highest sugar or have the highest amount of artificial colors in it and make them disappear. You don't have to tell your children that you're doing that, but make them disappear. It'll be better for you and better for them. As much as possible, monitor the sugar. National Diabetes Month, we need to be mindful. Okay, we're going to take a break. Actually, what we're going to do is look at this week's episode of The A Word. This is the really wonderful and moving documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. We're catching him at this point about 9 or 10 weeks into ABA therapy and seeing that he is beginning to interact and want to interact. So take a look at this week's The A Word.
Pirate.
Penguin. Is he gonna come out of the egg?
Eggs.
Egg.
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 Egg. Can you say g? Say egg. Egg. You're trying. Miss Jessica's here. Yay!
It's gonna be a fun day.
Yay! Hi, Miss Jessica.
Hi,
Miss Jessica.
What's this?
Baby.
Baby? Baby? Who's this? Is this a mommy?
Buddy.
Yeah? Who else is in here?
Buddy.
Is this a daddy? Daddy? That's a daddy? Daddy.
Buddy.
And a mommy. And a what? And a what? Say, and a baby.
Baby.
Does the baby go in here? Say, sit down. Say, sit down.
Okay.
Yeah, you gonna go inside?
Ooh.
Whoa! Woo, are you gonna fly in the sky? There, let's go. Up the stairs. Let's go sit down.
Okay.
Yeah, sit down.
Ooh.
Ooh. Okay, take off.
Ooh.
Bye. See you later. Right now we're working on functional pretend play, which involves having him play with toys appropriately. For instance, having an airplane and putting the people in the airplane and flying it appropriately, so that when he does go to preschool, because other kids are doing imaginative play too, creative play, so he would be able to play with the other kids as well, appropriately and functionally. So right now it's just a lot of imitation, but once you just model for him a couple times, he can play with it, no problem. So with the functional pretend play program, with the
kitchen set and everything. Oh, really? It's really good for him because since he has so many issues with feeding, he can you know, play with the spoons, the forks, and not worry about having to actually feed himself anything. He can pretend to feed himself, feed me, feed the baby. There isn't an outcome where he has to eat anything at all. Look, go. You tried. Nice job. Very good. So yeah, so having and handling fake food isn't a problem, but when it comes to actually seeing real food, he can totally tell the difference, and he just sometimes just refuses, or most of the time just doesn't even touch it. Versus all these things, he has no problem. Cut. Good job. You want to peel the orange? What is this? Say orange. Orange. Here, peel it. There you go. Nice job. His mom has been having children shoot themselves, like brushing their teeth, jumping. And the other day, she showed me one where the kids were jumping. And he was watching it, and after that, he was actually jumping and imitating them too. And he actually got air, which we've been working on for a couple weeks already. When he sees the kids actually talking to him, he wants to do it even more.
So these are made by friends of yours?
Yeah, they posted them onto his website called Watch Me, Jack Riley.
And who came up with that idea?
That was my idea because he likes to watch kids on TV. And he thinks it's all very funny. But we need to get them eating. And I think that will help him tremendously. Do you want to watch the kids jump now?
They're talking to you!
Bye, Jack Riley. Do you want to watch the ABCs or do you want to watch jumping again? ABCs or jumping? Jumping. You made that clear. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
It's a combination of some of those letters.
P, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Yay! Do you want to make your sounds?
Who's that?
Body.
Yeah. And who's that over there?
Body.
No, who's that over there?
Daddy.
Yeah, that's Daddy. How about over there? Who's that?
Jessica, I don't know my name, it's too hard.
Jessica. Yeah, but the hard ones are the ones he breaks out without problem.
Yeah, yellow.
We were playing with
Yellow came out of nowhere.
Riley.
Yellow and Riley, yeah, Jack.
We were playing with the dolls, and I named the baby, the mommy and the daddy, and he said Bommy.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the M now.
It's getting closer.
I have him say milk in the morning,
Not to start
and
a word,
now
no.
I'm just starting with instead of, because if I say milk, he'll say ba.
Oh.
So if I say milk, he'll say ba.
Ba.
How old are you?
Daddy.
Daddy. Yeah.
Bye.
How old are you?
Ho ho.
How old?
Ho ho. Two.
Two.
What's your name? What's your name? Can you say Jack?
Riley.
Jack Riley.
Riley.
Riley. Riley.
That's clear.
Riley.
Can you say Jack Riley?
Tell Riley.
Very good. How old are you? How old are you?
How old are you?
4.
How old are you, Jack? Hey.
Jack.
He likes looking at you guys through this so much.
How old are you? 2.
Are you 2?
Are you 468? No. How old is Jack? How old is Jack? Say, I'm 2.
I'm 2.
Yay! Good job.
I'm 2. I'm 2 also.
Is Daddy 2?
I'm too many.
So cute, so cute. That is the A Word, and you can watch the entire series from beginning up until, not end, because it's ongoing, but to where they've gotten so far on their very own YouTube channel that you're seeing there on your screen. And some of the latest videos are about potty training. Pretty cool. So I encourage you to check those out. And it's great to have them there at your disposal and be able to watch whenever you want. So you can watch one of the older ones and then go back and watch one of the earlier ones and really see that arc of ABA that I'm always talking about that's just amazing. I call it the autism miracle in my living room because it's amazing. In any case, wanted to talk a little bit today about, since we talked about food earlier, and we've been talking about systematic desensitization here. This is a little boy, Jack Riley, who has some very big aversions to food. He will eat a banana. It's one of the few things that he will eat at this point of the game, but where we're watching today. But if you show him a full banana, he literally bursts into tears. So there is something aversive about bananas, and there's something about aversive about food in general. We don't know why, and he, at this point, does not have the words to be able to tell us why. It's a very frustrating thing, but do we just say, oh, well, there it is, there's the autism, there's nothing we can do about it? No. Do we keep doing things in a way that frustrates the child and frustrates the parents? No. A lot of times, what you do is take something outside of itself and work on it in a way that you don't have to deal with the aversive stuff. So you see him there with those great Melissa and Doug wood toys. You gotta love the Melissa and Doug aisle of any toy store because they really have well-made, intuitive toys that are great for working on real-life situations without the mess. So if we were going to teach Jack Riley how to peel an orange, and we can, and they will eventually, there are going to be a lot of different steps, but there's going to be a bunch of sensory things included in it, and right now those sensory things for him are just too hot. We're really not going to make progress if we're trying to work on the fine motor skill of peeling an orange and what that takes to be able to pull the skin off of the orange. We're not going to get there. We're not going to reach success because we're going to have a little boy who the little the essence of the orange skin is going to be spitting out, and he's going to have a reaction to it. But we can take these wooden ones and they can peel the orange, they can section it. It's really cool. And at the same time, so we're working on those fine motor skills that are really important, but we're also showing him that fruit doesn't have to be aversive. And if we move very slowly, then we see progress. And you can see the progress that they have made with him on his issues with food. Are they completely done yet? I really just don't think so. But we talk all the time about when some of these issues really take painstaking, moving the needle incrementally. But, at some point, it does add up. It really, literally adds up. So really amazing to be able to watch the arc here in terms of potty training, be able to watch the arc in terms of him speaking and being conversational and being more interested in people than things. And dealing with his food issues. Teaching him how to suck from a straw is included in this series. So take a look. I encourage you to check it out and see what's happening more recently with the A Word. Little programming note here. Did you know that today is National Family Literacy Day? I did not know that. But our good friends have written in and told us about Monica Holloway, is an amazing author and a really fun woman and a great mom. She's an autism mom. She she wrote the book Cowboy and Wills, which I loved. I would encourage you that if you need a good read and you're an autism parent and you'd like to feel a kinship with somebody and not have, it's not a heavy-handed thing about autism at all. It literally is her memoir of her child's relationship with his dog Cowboy. And it's touching, you'll laugh. Oh my goodness, there are only maybe 5 books that I love to laugh. And I'm somebody who, I consider myself having a good sense of humor and I'm interested in those kinds of things. I think there are probably 5 books in my life that have made me laugh out loud. And Cowboy and Wills is one of those books. And Monica Holloway wrote that. She's been on the show here before. We've interviewed her a couple of times. And more recently with her husband, Michael Price, who is a writer on The Simpsons and also writes for some of the Star Wars Lego movies. They're really an amazing and very funny and talented couple. But anyway, Monica Holloway, author of Cowboy and Wills, has been asked in honor of National Family Literacy Day today, November 1st, to provide a wonder of the day. There's a wonder every day on wonderopolis.org. That's spelled WONDEROPOLIS.org. You can go there today and see the wonder of the day. Monica is there sharing something about aquariums and fish because her child is very interested in animals, and so she's writing about fish. So I hope you will check that out. And also, I urge you to get a copy of Cowboy and Wills. It's in its, I don't know how many printings, but it's available in paperback now. And it's one of those things that you probably should get to because you're going to want to read it and you're going to want to share it with other people. It's a great gift for somebody who has a child on the autism spectrum and enjoys laughing and being hopeful. It is a bit of a tearjerker too, but a lovely, well, beautifully rich written book, and I don't say that lightly. All right, we are going to take a break, and during our break, what we would like to show you, one of the people that is very involved in the A word has started a new segment for us, which I got to see this morning in preview, and I just loved it. So we're really excited to share this with you. And it's a new segment called Smarty for doing art and doing it in a smart way with our kids. So take a look. This is Suzanne Oshinsky with Smarty.
Arts and craft activities are a great way to practice on skills you're already working on with your child. For the month of November, we'll be making a paper corn. The skill we're going to be focusing on with this activity is fine motor, more specifically the pincher grasp. You'll see why in just a moment. Depending on the skill level of your child, you can also have them help you fold the paper, trace the silhouette of the corn, or cut it out. It all depends on what you want to be focusing on today. The materials you'll be needing are paper, tissue paper, a pencil, glue, and a cup of water and paintbrush if you're using the wet glue, scissors, and a template you can download from our website at facebook.com/autismlive. And don't forget to like us while you're there. Or you can always just draw it from your imagination. All right, let's start the activity. First I want to do is take my tissue paper I bought from the store and turn it into strips that I can then turn into squares. Again, they don't need to be perfect squares because we're going to be changing its form anyways in the end. All right, and as you can see, I've done it to several different colors. I cheated, and they're all right here for me to use. All right, the next thing we want to do is to make the shape that we're going to be gluing all the kernels onto. I have my template that I already downloaded from facebook.com/autismlive, and now I'm going to use this to make the form that we're going to be gluing onto. I'm going to take one of my pieces of paper, I'm going to fold it in half. This way the corn will be symmetrical. Once it's been folded in half, I'm going to take my form and then I'm going to trace around it. And again, depending on your child's skill level, either you can do it or the child can do it. But again, the focus of this activity is the pincher grasp. All right, now that I have it traced, I'm going to cut it out. And ta-da, here is my blank corn, but it's missing its kernels. So now that's what we're gonna be working on. I'm gonna use this glue, but you can always use a glue stick as well. The reason why I like this one is that it doesn't dry as fast. So I'm gonna squeeze it all over my corn and then take my paintbrush, dip it in some water, and then smear it all over the corn. The next step is making the kernels. What your child is gonna do is take one of the tissue squares and practice their pincher grasp. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And once they have this, then they're gonna place it onto the corn. And as you can see, it's got a lot of surface area to cover with these kernels, so lots of opportunities to practice their pincher grasp. And ta-da, it's done. As you can see, lots of opportunity to practice your child's pincher grasp. When you're finished, don't forget to share your pictures online at facebook.com/autismlive. I look forward to seeing them and see you soon. Bye.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back. So that was Smarty, really exciting, and I hope you noticed, because here's a craft, right? But I loved that on each step of the way she showed you what skills you have the potential to work on, and keeping in mind that depending on where your child's development is, there are some elements that you may not have your child do and have them focus on others. But even very small kids, the whole idea of using that pincer grasp to crunch up the tissue, very reinforcing for them and very important. If you notice, when your kids go to kindergarten, as they're working on handwriting skills, they spend as much time anymore making those little things. I can remember in first grade saying, man, how much longer are we going to be doing this? Because it seemed like every day my son was bringing home something that they were twirling tissue paper as much as anything else. And it was pointed out to me, this is so crucial to develop those pincer grasp and hand finger muscles so that they can do the level of writing that they're going to have to do. You know, if you are in a profession at this point in your life where you don't do a whole lot of writing, and then you have to sit one day and do a lot of handwriting, your hand cramps up, it gets stiff, it starts to hurt. So we want to make sure for kids in classroom settings that they build those muscles up so that they can be able to do the amount of writing that they have to do until everything is on computer, and we know we're moving towards that. But at this point in time, for our kids taking whatever the standardized tests are for them to graduate from high school and to progress and you know, go from grade to grade, but especially to be able to graduate, they have to be able to write essays. They have to be able to handwrite, and somebody has to be able to read it. There isn't a way to type that in yet. So really important for our kids to give them, because there's so many other things that you have to deal with in terms of handwriting, and there's sensory issues happening in the classroom. We don't want to get all the rest of that in the right place and then still not be able to do it because the hand muscles aren't strong enough. And again, we take it out. We could have them practice writing, but that's not really reinforcing, right? We can take things outside of the area that we want to work on them in another way that's reinforcing, and crumping up tissue paper, colored tissue paper, and gluing it onto something can be really reinforcing for a lot of kids. If it isn't what's reinforcing for your child, there are many other things. You know, with toddlers, we take, and on the high chair tray, we put down raisins and have them, or little pieces of cereal, so they have to pick it up and work on the pincer grasp there. So there are lots of different ways to work on pincer grasp, but what a great way, a great fall activity. And by the way, that template is available for you right now on our show, Autism Live on Facebook. You can find it there, and while you're there, give us a like and let us know what you think of Smarty. This is going to be a regular feature every month with an appropriate seasonal craft. So check that out. We're going to take just a little break here, and then we're going to come back to talk about your answers to the question of the day. Stick with us.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on Ask Dr. Doreen. Yes, don't forget, next Wednesday we start Ask Dr. Doreen. That will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Your opportunity live to ask whatever questions that you want. I know some of you have already been writing in. We have a list of questions that we've been compiling, but you can also ask them live. Really an amazing woman, truly a visionary in the field of autism. And I'm excited about having the opportunity to talk to her on a weekly basis and all the things that we can all learn from her. Really excited about that. Okay, so I promised you that we were going to take a look at your answers to the question of the day. The question of the day today was, how has your child's inflexibility affected the entire family? And you guys had a lot to say about that, but it kind of went into a couple of different categories, and the first one being that it creates difficulties with your significant other. And boy, does that strike a chord with me in terms of, for those of us who are lucky enough to be dealing with autism and having a significant other who's sticking around to do it, it's still not all hearts and flowers and roses, right? And especially it's difficult when we get into challenging behavior and dealing with inflexibility. And in some respects, I think that inflexibility is the harder one, because when our child is engaging in full-on tantrum, meltdown, challenging behavior, those kinds of things, it's abundantly clear to all of us something has to be done, right? There may be discussions about what is going to be done, and that can be really difficult, right? But I think that when there's challenging behavior that's true challenging behavior, everybody's on the same page that this is not okay. When it's inflexibility, right? Sometimes there are many shades of gray about, well, if we just do it this way, then he will do it, right? And there's a whole lot of room for parents to not be on the same page. And that's just the hardest thing, right? It's the most frustrating thing, because one parent is like, just let them have their way. And the other parent says, no, we're thinking of the long term. We got to make sure, right? And neither one is wrong. Neither one is wrong, because it's all situational and what you have on board to handle today. And one of the things that I've been told is to keep in mind when the other parent is saying, let's just let it go for today, let's just do it the way that they need to for today, to keep in mind that that is because they aren't equipped to deal with it today, and that we need to be kind and compassionate about that. But it can't be the long-term strategy, right? Because otherwise what we find is, I always picture, it's that thing of painting yourself into a corner where you go, I'll deal with that in a minute, right? You're painting until you find yourself in a place where you've got no place to go. And we don't want to be in that position with our kids or with our significant other. So some of the things that we can do are to involve a third person if you're working with a BCBA, to when you have clinic time where both parents are there and the staff is there to talk about which kinds of circumstances should we allow this inflexibility, what are we doing about it, and why, so that it isn't always coming directly from you. If you don't have the benefit of a clinic situation, as best as you can to keep an open discussion when it's not happening. It's so difficult when a child is engaging in something and you're trying to get out the door and the child is saying, no, I have to do this first. And one parent is saying, just let them so that we can go. And the other parent is saying, no, I can't take this anymore. That's not the ideal moment to talk about, well, what are we going to do about this on a regular basis? Survive the moment in the best way that you know how, with nobody getting hurt, right? But as soon as tempers and emotions and sensory things are not at high pitch, that's a good time to talk about it, saying, can we come up with a plan? I want us to be on the same page. I want us to be a team. I want us to be able to figure this out and know that this is the way in which we're going to do this, because we want to present a united front to the child. If a child thinks that if I push, I'm going to get away with something, then we can actually make the behavior worse. So getting on the same page, so very important. Another person wrote in and said, and this was something that was reiterated by a bunch of people, that the inflexibility is that the child cannot be watched by somebody else. So that having babysitters is really difficult, which again puts stress on the partnership of the parents. And that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. Of course, I would say if you're working with a BCBA, that it's possible through several different techniques, and maybe even one of them being systematic desensitization, where inviting, we did a thing on babysitting a couple of weeks ago about strategies to make it so that you're comfortable. They would go hand in hand with what would make it comfortable for your child. Having that babysitter be there during hours when you're there several different times to make your child comfortable, to make you comfortable before you babysit, might be a thing to consider. It's not going to work for everybody, but maybe it's time to get some help. A BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism and has experience with this specific behavior. All right. Interesting. We've got more in, but we're going to hold on that. Maybe if we have time at the end of the show, we'll get back to that. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to take on our executive function skill of the week, organizing materials for ease and productivity. Should be interesting. Stick with us.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer, how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the difference between success and failure? And how can we ensure success? Well, a lot of people think that making sure that you achieve success is just a matter of planning. An interesting idea. But what happens if you don't know how to plan? Right? Then where are we on the timeline between success and failure? When we talk about executive functions on the show, we're talking about all the skills that need to be brought together to be able to achieve a goal. And certainly part of that is planning. Some of it is planning ahead. Some of it is being able to plan and organize things in the moment. It's also being able to recognize whether what you're doing is working. And if you think about it, all throughout your day and all throughout your life, you have little teeny tiny goals that you have to achieve that require a certain amount of planning. And then you have the bigger goals that take even more planning. Well, today we want to talk a little bit about a lesson in organizing materials, which takes a certain amount of planning, a lot of it in your head. But think about what is overwhelming to your child. And think about about the current space in which your child plays, which might at this moment in time be a disorganized mess. And wouldn't we like it if we could get to a point where our child knew how to organize their own things in a way that was efficient and productive? And think about the last time that you were asking a child to move something from one place to another. Right? And did your child have the skills to be able to do that efficiently, or did it become overwhelming to them? The truth is, if you don't have a plan or a sort of rule of thumb about how to do things, it can be overwhelming. And that's not just for children on the autism spectrum, that's for all of us. If you walked into a room that was a hazmat nightmare and you had no idea how to clean up chemical spills that were hazardous, it would be very overwhelming to you, right? But there are people who do that job because they have a list of things, well, this is how you do it. You start this way and you do this. And that's true for most things in life. So we're going to talk a little bit about teaching our kids how to organize materials in sort of a broad spectrum. So some of the things that we want to consider when we're teaching our kids on the spectrum, these kinds of things, that organizing materials in different settings, we want to be very aware that depending on the setting, it can be very overwhelming to them. And so it could be the same materials, but if the setting is different, it can change. So for some children, if you ask them to put some things together and do it in a quiet place at home, they're able to do it. But when there's kids yelling in the classroom and all kinds of things going on and people watching them, it might be an entirely different activity for them. So when we start to work on these things, we're going to work with small, manageable actions, things that they can do that help to progress things along so that they're more likely to reach their goal. We're going to give rules when applicable when teaching a child how to organize materials. It's not always going to be applicable, but for some things that we're going to see in just a second, there are some rules that are applicable. So we're going to make sure that we state those clearly. We're going to encourage the child to think about factors that are not visible. This is so important with executive functions, that thinking about things in a way that isn't entirely concrete, and then we're going to reinforce. So when they do things properly, we're going to make sure that they get some sort of reward for it. Okay, so let's take this to using a specific lesson. And in this specific lesson that we're going to go over, it's about carrying items. So I said before about if your child had to move things from one space to another space. So in this particular lesson, our SD, we talked about this the other day, the SD is the thing that you say or do that lets the child know that behavior is expected from them, and then they'll get reinforcement for them. So the parent/teacher presents pictures. Remember how I said we take things outside of ourselves? We're not already starting with the items. We're just going to work with pictures to introduce a rule. So the teacher or parent presents pictures of a suitcase, a phone, a backpack, a table, a television, and a small CD player, and says to the child, we're going to give the rule now, you should ask for help to carry heavy items or large items. And now we ask the child, sort these pictures into the ones that you should ask for help to carry and the ones that you should carry on your own. So we're going to make two piles. We've given them the rule and we've given them these pictures, separate them into two piles. What can you carry on your own? What do you need help with? And you have to ask for help. So the child sorts the suitcase, the table, the television in one pile, that they need help with those, and the phone, the backpack, and the CD player into a second pile because they can carry them. And then we reinforce. Imagine how many different ways that you can do this lesson and build on this lesson. But if we start and give the rule in this thing that's outside of all the sensory and say, okay, so what can we do? We're having the child think through. And it's actually really cool because they're having to think through, okay, so is a suitcase heavy? Is a TV heavy? Those things that they aren't necessarily getting the whole visual of it because we've plopped the TV down. They're not going to have to think through it as much. Eventually, we're going to give the child activities where we're going to put things on the table and have them figure out how do you carry what can you carry? How do you carry them? How do you carry them all at one time, or how many trips can you do it in? Working on the child being able to stack those things appropriately. There are even lessons about how to pack things into your backpack so that your papers don't get smushed and your books don't get destroyed. Sometimes these kinds of lessons, it feels like, wow, do we have to go to that extreme? Not for all children, but for the ones that we do, it's not that much of an extreme to give them the rules, because once they learn it, you don't have to keep going back over it, and they have that skill then, and it changes so very much. All of these lessons, including the one that you see on the screen here, are available for you in the skills program. You can find the skills program at the site that you see on your screen there. There are free trials available to try it. I use this at home. I love this. And I love it for my child, but you know what? There are parts of things there, especially in the executive functions curriculum, that I love for myself. There's even a handout of how to pack a beach bag. And the way I pack my purse has changed based on what I learned in the executive functions curriculum for skills. Is it still a little bit messy and disorganized? Yes. But is it better? And have I thought through about what needs to be where and when heavy things need to be on the bottom? Yes, because I tend not to think about those things. So it's helpful to me, and it can be very helpful to our kids on the autism spectrum. And once they know these rules, it's amazing how they can put them together. I've seen this with my son, that there are some things that his level of maturity versus some of the other kids that he's in class with has jumped exponentially because he's thinking these things through. How many of us know a teenager that you go, seriously, were you raised in a barn? You can't put the eggs underneath the milk. Like, what? But sometimes they don't get it until we tell them the rule. And I'm talking about completely neurotypical kids, right? I love the executive functions curriculum of skills and encourage everybody, every teenager should have the benefit of these lessons. But especially for our young kids on the autism spectrum, it sets them up for success. It's a great thing. All right, we're going to take a break, and we are going to be back with more Autism Live, so stick with us. We're here right now with cookbook author Dana Lake. We've got your book here, the kid-friendly ADHD and Autism Cookbook. Tell us a little bit about how this cookbook came about and what things parents will find in this cookbook.
Well, they'll find recipes, but more than that, we decided that there were a lot of good cookbooks. Our colleagues have written them, and that people didn't need another cookbook. What they needed to understand is, why do you use the diet? What's behind it? What is the biochemistry, the digestive issue that mandates using a specific diet? We were writing about gluten-free, casein-free, but we also talked about the other diets. And we decided that we would handhold them just like we're talking to a parent. So the follow-up is that we have now written the ADHD and Autism Nutritional Supplement Handbook. And we did the same thing. We're talking to a parent. What do you take? What is the most important thing? And we identified 6 of the major supplements that have the least side effects and the most impact. And we start with that. We call it the quick start. And then we go through the symptoms. The second half of the book is the biochemistry, the specifics, the science. We wanted to do more of that, but you can't put out a phone book. Right. So that's the book, and we're very pleased with it. It's out now on Amazon for orders, and it's out as of January of 2013.
That was Dana Lake. We were thrilled to have an opportunity to talk with her when we were at the recent Autism Research Institute convention that took place in Orange County, California. And I know some of you have written in with questions about specific diets having to do with autism, and there are many. There are many diets, and I think it's important for everybody to realize that dietary intervention for autism is not a new thing at all. And it is a very personal thing, something that when we talk about our kids and how individual they are and how we always want to be mindful of that, and we talk about how important it is that our kids be healthy. And all of our kids have their very own, what I refer to as their ecosystems, how things work within their bodies, just like we do. And it's so important that we're mindful of our children being healthy, and what does that mean for our individual children. And I always like to remind you that it's great to be able to consult with medical professionals. I will tell you, in my personal opinion, medical professionals are a little bit behind in terms of nutrition and the effects that different foods can have on our individual children. And your average pediatrician does not have access to, or has not had the time in medical school to learn about those kinds of things. That's the average. We're not going to say that all of them. So make sure that you know that you're talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about. My husband and I used to always have arguments about what do doctors know about nutrition and what does the run-of-the-mill doctor know about food allergies, food sensitivities, and food reactions. And my husband was always very adamant about the fact that these people know what they're talking about. They're medical doctors. And my point was, yes, but a medical doctor whose specialty is in hematology is not necessarily up on the allergic reactions that my body has as a result of eating something. It's not a thing against them. It's just saying, you know, there are limits, right? And he really just didn't quite believe me until when I was pregnant with my son and I was in the hospital not feeling well, and they said, we're just going to keep you overnight for observation because, you know, you're careful with pregnant women. And I said, that's great, but I'm going to have to send my husband to go get me something to eat. And they said, no, we have hospital food here. If you've never been in a hospital before, we have. And I said, yeah, but I have a lot of food allergies, food sensitivities. So, you know, I'm just going to send my husband down the street and have him get me something from the store that I know that's down there. And the woman said, no, like what? What would you, you know, we can make you a sandwich. And I said, yeah, but I am allergic to wheat. I personally am allergic to wheat. And she said, it's okay. We can make you a sandwich on white bread. And I sat there and looked at her and went, what? What did you just say? And she said, no, we can make you a sandwich on white bread. To which my husband said, what do you think is in white bread? What do you think it's made out of? White? It's made out of wheat. It's just made out of wheat that's been bleached. She's still allergic to it. And the doctor, full-on doctor, we're not talking about even an intern here, kind of made a face and she was like, oh, and walked away. I'm sure it occurred to her, you know, and I'm sure she was thinking about other things. And then I turned to my husband and said, you see? And he said, all right, okay. But I do think it's important to make sure that you're talking to somebody that does know what they're talking about nutritionally. And there are so many opportunities and websites and books that have been written about different dietary interventions once you see what your child is having issues with. But for those of us who have children that are reactive to different things, getting our child healthy first, making that a priority so that they can learn, made a huge difference. So if you're looking at your child and you see a child who is totally healthy and you don't see that your child is having any skin issues, and your child is sleeping fine, and there are no kinds of behaviors where they're pushing on their stomach or hitting their head or self-injurious, then perhaps that's not a thing that you're going to spend time looking into. But if your child is having health issues, that they seem to have recurrent any kind of infections, or they seem to have their bowel movements are not what you would like them to be. And it can be any end of the spectrum, whether they're having constant diarrhea or regular diarrhea, or they're constantly constipated, you know, that's not ideal for learning. If your child is having sleep disturbance, there's a potential that you might want to rule out that it's something food related. I know that it could seem overwhelming with everything else that you've got going on, but if it's one of the pieces that's missing for your individual child, and again, that's not all children on the autism spectrum, but if it's one of the pieces that's missing for your individual child, it can make a world of difference. I tell people, and I'm not saying that every child should be on a gluten-free, casein-free diet, as we were just talking about the clip that we saw with Dana Lake explaining GFCF and how to do it and why to do it for some kids. But for my child, I can tell you that we had lost all language. And as we were getting ready to start ABA and we removed any kind of gluten and any kind of casein from his diet, we saw a real shift in his ability to begin to learn. It was one part of the component. I've always said that ABA was the autism miracle in my living room. Putting my son on the proper diet was the autism miracle in my kitchen. And that when we had those two things cooking on both rails, right, is when we had our best results. By getting him healthy, we were in our best possible position to have ABA help him as much as it did. It's really important that our kids be healthy. And if diet is a component of it, it is manageable, and there's books and lots of other parents, including myself, who are happy to let you know how to feed your happy, healthy child. And if it isn't, then congratulations, but get down to ABA. In both cases, get down to ABA as quick as you possibly can. Okay, we are going to take a break, and we will be back. I don't know if we're watching another video that we got from ARI, or you know what I would love to show Emily that I haven't seen in a couple of days is the skate video. We had an opportunity to go a couple of weeks ago to the Skate Connection was having a wonderful, wonderful event where they hold regular workshops, I guess is the best word for them, where kids can come and learn about skateboarding. But at least a couple of times a year, they turn their workshop and they focus it into helping kids, making sure that they've got time and people and equipment there to work with kids who have special needs of all different kinds. And it was I went with my son, and we were there with cameras and got to meet some really fun people and some fun kids. And the instructors, I have to say, they were just amazing. They were patient. They didn't know what ABA was, but they were breaking things down into small increments and reinforcing the kids. So unbeknownst to them, they were following great ABA rules. So is that something that we can show, Emily? I think so. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. This was us at the Skate Connection. Tell us how you came up with this idea to do this.
I got into hanging out with special ed kids like in high school. I joined Best Buddies, but I always kept skateboarding. I had these two inspirations. I didn't want to just do one or the other. Like, this is what came out of it. No one should be like deprived of the love of skateboarding. They all have the ability. It just takes like the push, and that's what we try to provide here.
You're here with your son today.
Yes.
Why did you come to this event?
I came so he could learn how to skateboard.
We've been standing here watching him for just a couple of minutes, and he's already getting the hang of it. And the grin on his face
And yeah,
says it all.
yeah, you can see it right there.
Oh my God! Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh?
Is this the first time you've done this?
Yes, it is.
You're doing such a great job, though.
It's all gravity and it's all balance.
Why did you want to do this today?
Because it was my 17th birthday. We found this out, so I came here, and now off I go. I'm skating now.
He loves this. This is probably one of the coolest things he's ever done, and the fact, it's really a neat program. The instructor he has is very understanding and is taking his time to work with him. I figure if the kids are leaving sweaty and smiling, then that's what it's about. That was my kid at the end. At the very end.
you know what's fascinating about it is we talk all the time about doing a task analysis and then taking just a small chunk of a behavior and working on that. But sometimes we don't know what the task analysis is. And I do love that about skills, is that it gives me the task analysis for things like riding a bike. But for this specific thing, it was fascinating to watch when you do know what the small little skills are, how quickly somebody can learn by breaking it down into that. So there were a couple of different things that they were teaching all the kids about where to put your feet and how to put them. And there was one moment when they were showing how when you're trying to paddle, I don't know what you call it, but when you paddle on a skateboard to with your foot, I'm thinking about, we just saw a video of a dog doing this the other day, and the dog was doing this he was pawing with his paw, and then you put your foot up, but you have to turn your foot in order to do this. And this was an element that I was not getting. So when I was trying to teach my son on his scooter, his little scooter, we weren't having success because there was an element that I was missing, that he needed to paddle with his foot and then put his up and turn it in a different way and then turn it to put it down. And that was the element that we were missing. So he was able to do it, and it took them 3 seconds to teach him how to do that because they knew that step that I didn't know. And whenever we're teaching, we always talk about being more efficient, more effective working with our kids on the spectrum, but part of that is knowing what all of the different steps are and not having to reinvent the wheel. They were teaching all the kids how to stand there with their skateboard, and instead of having to bend over to pick it up, how to put their foot down on the one end of it to flip it up and catch it. Really, it was one of those cool things that they were all practicing and being cool. But it was a really wonderful, heartwarming event to see the kids being so filled with the pride of knowing what they could do, instead of in that moment of thinking, what can't I do? Or watching and looking at something and not knowing how to do it. And when we talked to the young men about what made them start doing this particular workshop, they all had been participating at their high school when they were in high school as buddies. And so there would be someone who had special needs that was buddies with each one of them. And they were noticing the one group of boys were boys who skateboarded on a regular basis. And it would be time for them to go and skateboard, and their special needs buddies would be left out and would say, I feel left out of this. And so they made a priority to teach them how to skateboard. By the way, there's still, years later, these young guys who are in college, and some of them just graduating from college, they're still buddies with those special needs friends. And to watch them work with our kids, I just saw a level of patience, a level of acceptance, a level of letting the child reveal who they were and what their inflexibilities were, what their abilities were, and what their fears were. They didn't assume. There was no assumption. It just was very heartwarming to watch that moment because, sometimes when our kids come up and they say something, or if they're labeled and it's an event and it's autism, there are people who just have a judgment, well, that must mean your child is, and fill in the blank with whatever it possibly could be that they think they're talking about. And this was not happening with this group of young men. It was really, really very inspirational. So that's the Skate Connection, and I know that they're interested in having more of these things around the country and potentially around the world. So if it's something that interests you and you wish that you had something like it in your community, drop us a line and let us know, and we'll refer you to the Skate Connection so you can talk to them about having these kinds of events in your community. We're going to take a quick break and come back to finish out the show. Stick with us.
Autism used to affect 1 in every 10,000 children. Now it affects 1 in every 91 kids.
TACA is one of 5 organizations helping families living with autism today.
Our kids came back to life. There's a whole community out there, and now we're a part of it.
Oh, TACA has a place for me.
To find TACA, go to www.tacanow.org. Please.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I wanted to talk just a little bit about Halloween and ask you guys how things went for you on your Halloween adventure. It was really interesting to me. My son very much was requesting going with a very specific friend, and I was so thrilled that the family was willing for us to all go together. And I mentioned before, seeing the interaction. The younger boy was fearless. He was just running up to doors and pushing the the doorbells, and my son and the boy who was his age, they were hanging back more. It's very interesting because we see sometimes that fear doesn't move chronologically in a straight line, right? That there are different ages where there are a little bit of a spike of concern and fear because kids learn there are things to be afraid of. It's kind of an appropriate thing. It wasn't stopping them from going trick-or-treating, but they were being very cautious about things. I had the opportunity the week before to be with kids who were just a little bit older. There were kids that were from 9 to 13, and the 11-year-olds to the 13-year-olds were all about the fear factor. Going through the haunted house and being the daylight scared out of them. But the kids who were 9 and 10, and again, not kids who were on the spectrum, were all a little bit skittish, a little bit less likely. So a very interesting thing. But it was also interesting to watch as the evening progressed about all the things that we have talked about here in the last week in the show about the costume pieces coming off, and things got hot or things were tight or things just were rubbing in different places. My son was wearing a pair of goggles, and at the end of the night he had a lovely little red line on his nose that was fortunately gone by this morning. But as the night went, different pieces from all the kids were coming off. Very interesting to see how our kids react and grow, and what is fun to them and what is not, because we got about a half an hour into it, and like I said, the younger brother of the friend that we went trick-or-treating with, he was having a great time, and he was just steamrolling through the houses and running from house to house, and the two older boys were like, okay, are we done yet? Are we close to being done? We eventually got to a place in the neighborhood where it was very social, that a lot of the kids that they go to school with were out. My neighborhood does Halloween pretty big, and especially one end of the neighborhood blocks off, and they bus people in, and they have a theme, and there's houses in a cul-de-sac that they do a theme every year that goes a little extreme. But a lot of the kids from their school were down in that area, and people were yelling to each other and saying, hey, and they just felt like the big men on campus because their friends were yelling and saying, hey. And very interesting for me to watch my son gauging off of other people's behavior. The first time that a kid walked by, and he couldn't tell who they were because they had a mask on, and they walked by and said, hey, Jem! And he, was like, how do they know who I am? And he said that to the child, how do you know who I am? And the child said, I go to school with you. And so it was this very interesting thing. And he said to me, Mom, that was somebody that I go to school with. And I said, well, who was it? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, maybe next time. That's a reasonable question that you can ask. So as he and the other boy were walking along, and kids were yelling out, they would say to them, who are you? And then the child would lift up their mask and they go, oh, and they'd have a little conversation. And he was really gauging off of the other kids, which is great. It's taken a long time for my son to begin to look at other kids' behavior and decide what's appropriate in this very bizarre context that I've never been in before. But he was definitely making it happen, but he was pooped. He was totally pooped. And that's a good thing. I'm sure school today, they said they had school today, the day after Halloween. I'm sure that was fun for the teacher. All those tired kids. But we do what we have to do, right? In any case, we're here at the end of the show, and I want to take a minute to talk to you about a couple of things. Don't forget that Ask Dr. Doreen starts next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. And you'll be able to ask her live questions during that hour. Also, if you're in the Chicago area and looking for quality ABA, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders in Chicago is having an open house on November 17th. That is a Saturday, and I would encourage you to go to centerforautism.com, click on the locations tab, go to the Chicago office. You'll find out all the information that you want then. And they're encouraging you to bring your child with you. There will be people there to do an activity with, and by the way, we're talking about ages 2 to 21, to bring those young people with you, that they'll have activities for them to do so that you can have conversations. That is again on November 17th. It is a Saturday. Don't forget that this Saturday, the Home Depot will be doing their free craft for children, their kids workshop, that you can go on Saturday at all Home Depots and do that free craft with them. It's usually seasonally based and very fun. They're very it's all about the child learning and growing, and they're very accepting of accommodations that our children need to have. Emily's going to start to show you the different ways that you can get in touch with us, because as this show ends, the conversation continues and goes on and on. We appreciate all the time that you guys take when you do write in to give us your suggestions, your comments, your questions, because this show is meant to help you and support you on this journey. I know that this journey is different for all of us, but it has its moments that can be very, very difficult, and you need support. Whether it's just somebody to say to you, you know what, you're doing a great job, this is hard, or whether it's an answer to a specific question about behaviors that you've seen that have popped up, something new that's happened that just mystified you. We appreciate always your telling us what you need, because not only does it have the potential to help you, but has the potential to help somebody else as well, someplace else in the world. So we thoroughly enjoy and appreciate it. You're not bothering us. When you write in and tell us what you want to see more about, it's a wonderful thing. So please participate in the conversation in whatever way works for you. Tomorrow is Friday. We've got some really exciting things planned for you. We are not, unfortunately, going to have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us, so I'll tell you that now so you can have your disappointment now, but he will be back with us the next week. So lots of fun things happening tomorrow that you won't want to miss. We will be back at 1 p.m. Eastern Time live and 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.